In the Vampire Chronicles, the vampire creation process is incredibly detailed, and unlike other franchises, we are fortunate enough to have quite a lot of information on how it works. So I've gone through the Interview with the Vampire book, and I've also had a look at the Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned, which took about 7 or 8 days in order to extract every single step, every single detail on how vampires are made, the effects and changes to the body, the transition, the first feed, the rules to follow when selecting a human to be turned. Basically guys, this video will cover absolutely everything. If you've ever wondered how it all works, if you ever wanted this small detail, then this will be the video for you because, as I said, no stone will be left unturned. So let's dive right in to the creation process of vampires from Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. In the world of the Vampire Chronicles, the making of a vampire is referred to as the Dark Gift, as that's how it's looked upon. Many vampires believed that to be immortal, to have such incredible powers and to be able to see the world for what it truly was in fact a gift. It was not to be given to the unworthy or the undeserving, although history shows that that was not entirely adhered to. When choosing a human to become a vampire, the individual had to have certain qualities about them and also needed to fit the mold. Now, what I mean by this is, for example, the human needed to be physically healthy, no underlying medical illnesses like cancer for example. The human needed to fall within a certain age bracket, as they would be forever frozen in time from a physical standpoint. That means no elderly people who are past their physical peak, and most certainly no children, due to the fact that the mind will continue to age but the body will not. Now the best example of this was Claudia's transformation. I have a video on the entire life of Claudia, you can check that out on my channel. Then there's the actual reason for the human's transformation. Most of the time they develop a connection with the vampire. They seek a life of immortality, and then the companionship that comes with it. They must also be made aware of the effect the change will have on their mind, how it will affect their senses, and the physical changes that will occur. A responsible vampire, respectful of the Dark Gift and the ways of a vampire, will relay all of this to the person beforehand, but as I said, it's not always been the case. When the time comes for the human to become a vampire in the Vampire Chronicles universe, a few things have to happen. The vampire needs to drain the human of approximately 95% of the blood in the body, leaving them on the brink of death from fatal blood loss. The human needs to have just enough energy to survive, and even with that, they need to use all of their willpower to keep themselves conscious. This is also a test of strength for the willing fledgling in order to show just how much they want the Dark Gift. The vampire will then make a cut on their throat or their wrist in order to feed the blood to the mortal. Now the wrist is the more popular choice to feed from, as the vampire can control the blood flow and quickly reopen the wound in case it heals if there is a slight delay, for example, in the individual actually starting to drink. It doesn't take a substantial amount to begin the transition, but as soon as it begins, the willing human gains an insatiable thirst for more, which results in the vampire having to most of the time physically restrain them. During the initial feed, the human begins to hear both his own and the vampire's heartbeat, as if they were two beating drums. That's how Louis describes it anyway. They are essentially taking in the essence of the vampire they drink from, and can inherit some of their powers, but it's not always the case. For example, Lestat inherited the ability to fly from his maker Magnus, but Louis never inherited that from Lestat. It all depends. Shortly after the initial intake of vampire blood, the human body begins to die. Now, if you've seen Interview with the Vampire, the 1994 movie that stars Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, this death happens really quickly. Louis rolls around in pain, dies, then becomes a vampire in about 60 seconds. In the book, it happens a little different. The heart does stop and the body dies, but it can actually take up to a week before the new vampire body rids itself of all human bodily fluids. The first 24 hours are initially uncomfortable, as the vampire is dealing with enhanced vision, hearing, strength, speed, and most notably, an almost alienating separation from the mortal world, like nothing from it makes sense anymore. Sometimes vampires can struggle with this change, as a massive part of it is losing their humanity and basically everything they've ever known about themselves as a human. If we go back to Louis' situation, for example, he held on to his humanity with every ounce of his strength, and he succeeded for a long time, which is what made him so appealable. A vampire that reflected humanity. It's a pretty cool character concept. During this time, the new vampire will, as I mentioned, gain the initial standard vampire powers. As this may be overwhelming, it's also pretty damn awesome. Imagine being able to move faster than the naked eye can track, or even throw a large object with force or punch through a wall. All the cool things. However, with that being said, there comes a downside. And what I mean by that is, many vampires consider the near uncontrollable urge to consume human blood a massive downside to their existence. It's an urge so strong that even the scent of blood could drive the new vampire into a frenzy. A good maker, a responsible maker, will take their fledgling out the next night and help them select what would be an easy target, especially for a first kill. This is essential as it teaches them how to basically survive. Some vampires can take to killing quite easily, and some may struggle, having to take a life in order to survive. What's most important is the way the life is taken. The drinker must always stop before their heart stops. They must sync their own heartbeat with that of the victims and time the exact moment when they stop their feed. Drinking beyond the heart stopping, or dead blood as it's called, threatens to pull the vampire to the brink of death itself. My own theory on this dead blood is to do with the spirit of Amel residing in vampires as part of the sacred core. Now, Amel loved nicking and cutting humans for fresh blood. He would not dare tolerate anything else, so to consume dead blood would mean the part of the core in the vampire would reject not only the blood, but the essence of Amel would forcefully withdraw from that vampire, killing them in the process. In the Vampire Chronicles, vampires become stronger as they age. This doesn't happen quickly, however. It can take centuries, if not millennia, before a vampire will reach what can be considered its peak level of strength. They almost become godlike in a way, and can develop additional powers that come with that growth. The Fire Gift, for example, which basically gives a vampire the ability to incinerate other beings with just a mere thought, is one that's most notable. Now, I mentioned how difficult a battle it is for vampires to deal with and control their bloodlust, but something even more daunting is the reward that so many humans crave when seeking to initially become a vampire: immortality. The thought of living forever may be extremely appealable, but it is exactly what it says on the tin. You can never die. You simply continue to exist. You don't go through a life cycle. You don't go through different stages. Technically, you're not even alive. And as I said, you're just existing. This begins to take its toll on vampires as they pass through what could be perceived as their third or fourth human lifespan, or the equivalent of a human lifespan. They will long for purpose, and sometimes it can be too much to bear. Such was the case with Lestat's maker Magnus, who ended his own existence as he longed for a release from the life he once desired so much that he kidnapped a vampire and stole the immortality. Or Nicky the L'Enfant, who, like Magnus, demanded the dark gift, and Lestat gave it to him. However, he grew more and more disillusioned with life as a vampire, which resulted in him destroying himself. So guys, as you can see, becoming a vampire is quite a detailed process, not just for what you have to go through during the transformation, but the life you face afterward. Make sure to check out my video on the history of vampires from the Vampire Chronicles by clicking the card right here.